Revolution is my optimistic scenario. Confrontation, knowing the way that things work in the United States, and especially the next 18 months or the remaining 18 months of this administration, confrontation seems to me in the cards. So I'll stop with that.
Bruce, I'd like to go back. You are a self-acknowledged optimist. You both look at the same history, the same information, and yet you seem to have very different views of what the likely progression is in Iran. Why are you more optimistic? And you cited the fact that State Department now has more people on Iran, but still a very small number. Do we really understand Iran? Do we understand the potential for revolution in Iran or changes in their policies towards the U.S. or even towards other countries in the region?
Oh, I agree with a lot of what Ken has just said.
Especially since I cited your cable.
And I agree. I've read his book, and you should go out there and buy the book in the interim that's time you're going to have after this session. What was the question? Is it free?
No, he had three. He had three for sale.
We could bid them up.
Okay. He and I agree on one thing fundamentally, and this is a theocracy. It is not a democracy. It is an authoritarian, theocratic regime. It has been from the outset in 1979. Damned difficult to deal with. We've never had to deal with it directly, in the sense. We've never had dialogue with it of any consequence. We've attempted it several times. In the aftermath of the events in Afghanistan in 2001, we were close to a dialogue. Well, we actually had some dialogue in Bonn with the Iranians, because Afghanistan is a neighbor, obviously, an immediate next-door neighbor to Iran. And what happens there is of considerable consequence to Iran. So we had some dialogue then. We had some again in 2003, when the Iranians appeared to be getting nervous about the strength of our military competence in the region and what we were doing with it. And we've had several brief, not so much brief in terms of actual contacts, dialogue with Iran in the context of P5+1. That's the group that has met twice to date, I think, or it's almost three, and is close to meeting again, possibly, where the 5 members of the Security Council, plus Germany, plus Iran, actually meet and talk with each other. So we've had direct dialogue, and not direct, sort of indirect dialogue with the Iranians in the context of P+5, P5+1. And we'll probably have some more if there is a response by that community, the powers of the Security Council and Germany. If the recent letter from the senior Iranian negotiator on nuclear issues, that letter is responded to, and there is a meeting again sometime in the future. But that's one of the problems. We don't have, in my view, any dialogue of consequence with Iranians. We should have dialogue. We should be talking to them now in an ideal world. When I got on the Algerian aircraft that was about to take us off to freedom in 1981, at the top of the ramp into that beautiful Algerian aircraft that flew us home to freedom in 1981, there was standing the senior hostage taker. And amidst all the shoving and pushing and yelling and screaming that they were doing, inveighing against us as hapless 53 hostages, I said to this fellow, I look forward to the day when your country and mine can again have normal diplomatic relations. As the senior hostage, I meant it then, and I have meant it since, that we should be talking with those people. They should be talking with us. Instead, we have been busy in the years since, good God, 30-some, almost 31 years, busy building the obstacles to effective diplomatic discourse with rhetoric that has been corrosive on both sides. If you want to hear what the Iranians think about us, you can go to the Friday prayers even to this day, and hearing them yell that America was a beastly place, death to America. That's the kind of dialogue we have had since then. We've been busy in talking about things that we think should be changed, mainly yelling at it and talking at each other, not with each other. Axis of evil talk, that kind of dialogue. We've been busy building the ambiance between our two countries, full of doubt, distrust, lacking trust. We don't trust each other. And in in diplomacy, you don't get anywhere in a dialogue with your counterpart if there isn't some degree of trust between the two of you. I feel strongly about that subject. I feel strongly about the need to find ways to build trust between our two countries. Iran matters. It matters to all of you. It matters to me. It matters to Ted, because it is there. It is a big and consequential place. Look at the map. Well, there it is, I think. It's hard to discern, but there it is. Squat in the middle of us. If you mean by us our presence in Afghanistan, and our presence particularly where it has been in Iraq, and our presence, go Navy, beat Army, in the Persian Gulf. Iran is there. We are there. We should be talking with each other, and we haven't found a way to do it yet.
I just want to respond to one thing that you said, Bruce, about dialogue with the Iranian regime. We've been talking to them incessantly. We've been talking to them incessantly. The Bush administration alone held 18 separate negotiating sessions, and I'd be happy to send you the details of each one, the date and who took place. The last one was after Condoleezza Rice said that we're going to make a deal with the Iranian regime and make them an offer that they can't refuse, and she sent in July of 2008 the then Undersecretary of State, William Burns, to go negotiate with the Iranians in Geneva, along with Europeans, and nothing happened. President Obama came in and said, oh my goodness, there's been no negotiations with the Iranian regime. We've got to reach out to them. We've got to talk to them. We've got to have dialogue. 10 months later, he decided to send somebody for the first session with the Iranian regime. You know who he sent? The exact same guy that the Bush administration had sent in July of 2008, William Burns. So there's been lots of negotiation sessions, lots of dialogues. They get nowhere. Here's what I want to really get to, and this is very important.
Those negotiations had no authority behind them, despite what you say.
The Undersecretary of State, he had the authority of Condoleezza Rice, who was Secretary of State, and he put a deal on the table the Iranians refused. It's a little bit like the Palestinians.
Yeah, in 1953.
Okay. Let me get to what I think is really important here, the nature of this regime. I mentioned right in the get-go here that I think that we're headed to either confrontation or regime change. The reason I believe that is because this regime is dedicated to the notion that through their actions, they can bring about the return of the 12th Imam. Now, this is foreign to us in the United States. We are not ideologically driven. We believe that people are like us. They respond to a cost, they make a cost-benefit analysis. You raise the cost of their actions, we impose sanctions on them, they change their behavior. That has not been what's happened with Iran. And the reason that it hasn't happened with this Iranian regime is because they are not driven by a cost-benefit analysis. They are driven by a radical Shiite ideology, especially a radical Shiite eschatology. This is end-of-the-world thinking. They believe that the 12th Imam, who, remember, went into his grand occultation at the age of 5 at the bottom of a well in the year AD 941, they believe that he is coming back and that they can bring him back by starting Armageddon, by starting a world war. This is what they actually believe. When Ahmadinejad took office, he held his first cabinet meeting in August of 2005. He gathered all the members of his cabinet together, and he says, we're going to sign a contract. And they said, okay. He said, we're going to sign a contract of what we're going to do in this government. And by the way, we're going to sign it with the 12th Imam. So they all wrote a pledge of loyalty and signed it. He passed it around this table, a pledge of loyalty to the 12th Imam. And we dedicate our service in the cabinet of the Islamic Republic of Iran to hastening the return of the 12th Imam. Then somebody raised their hand and he said, Your Excellency, where are we going to find the 12th Imam? I mean, he's our partner in this contract. He says, don't you worry, I'm going to send you to Jamkaran, where he's hiding in the bottom of the well, and you'll throw the paper down the well. Now, that is a true story. That is a true story. That is what we're dealing with here. We are dealing with a regime that seriously believes that a nuclear war that they unleash will bring about the good times, 1,000 years of Islamic justice in the world. There is no negotiating with a regime like that. The only thing that you can do is to, number one, prevent them from getting nuclear weapons if that's at all possible, and I don't believe that that's possible any longer, or number two, do your darndest to help the people of Iran to get rid of them, because God help us if we don't. And that's the second time I've said that, but you can see that that's where we are.
Where is the Arab Spring seen in Tehran today? Why isn't it seen there? Why isn't it heard from? And the answer is direct from the supreme leader. That's one of the problems with Iran today. We've got a supreme leader, we've got a theocracy that controls every single thing of consequence in that country. It cannot last, in my view, because it's contrary to the precepts of Islam, and it's contrary to the traditions, the proud traditions of Iranian history, that one person should dominate to that total extent. The question is asked, however, well, isn't there some consequence or some evidence of Arab Spring in Tehran? And there isn't, really. Because Khamenei makes it clear that he has said that the Arab Spring has been felt in Tehran already in the context of the successful revolution of 1979 that has put in place the autocracy, the theocracy that is in place and is the source of all God willing.
When I look again at all of the ethnic minorities, I think this is really the argument that's been raised. It's a split up of Iran, splitting up of Iran. I happen to know, as I mentioned, the leaders of most of the movements of these ethnic insurrectionist movements. With few exceptions, they are actually pro-Iranian. They see themselves as Kurdish Iranians. They don't see themselves as separatist Kurdish guerrilla fighters. The Baluchis see their future in Iran because they are worried as much about the Pakistani state as they are about the Iranian state. So I don't think that these ethnic movements are separatist in nature. This is, by the way, this is the Iranian regime tries to ascribe that intention to those of us who are advocating insurrection by some of these groups. They say, well, you're trying to split up Iran. No, we're not. And I don't believe that that will be the goal, and I don't believe that a future Iran that emerges out of a revolutionary or insurrectionist movement will be worse than the one we have today. The possible worst future I see is a military coup by the IRGC, and we're actually seeing that today. There is a quiet coup going on the ground by the IRGC. Then you can have essentially a religious fascist state, or a more fascist religious state. I'm not quite sure. It's the flavor changes. Is it vanilla fudge or fudge vanilla? But it would be slightly worse than you have today.